Okay, we're on air.
Cool. Right. Hey, hello, everyone. Welcome to another Node Build Working Group meeting. Today we have myself, Gibson Farnstock, Michael Dawson, Rod Vag, Raphael Ackerman, and George Adams for the first time, I think. So let's start with the stand-up. So in order, I guess, Rod? I don't know, what's the order normally? Yeah.
Sorry, we're doing startup.
Yeah.
Sorry, stand up. Stand up. Okay. Look, I don't have anything substantive other than the usual fixing release machines and stuff. Sorry, the test machines. Of note in that though, the mini nodes Odroid C2s have been updated in the inventory. The IP addresses are the same, but you now log in with a different username, so you don't log in with root anymore. So if you're logging into them, just take note of that. Aside from that, some weird Jenkins drama. Apparently the release Jenkins has got some issues still, but just the usual, keeping things afloat. Oh yeah, there was the Mac OS test machine. Had to completely reprovision the VM for that. Just a totally fresh one. Cannot figure out why the old one had trouble. It must have been something to do with the operating system, because when I did a new one from scratch, it was all fine. But that let me come up with a new script for setting up the machines. So I need to get that added to that non-Ansible doc. The description is floating in an issue that I think most of us have been interacting with. So, but that was a waste of a day. Okay, that's it from me.
Cool. So I guess Raphael.
So I had one issue, which was last meeting, which was to help the NAPI add-on job, which I've been mostly getting my hang around that. So that isn't completed yet. What I did do since then is I had, for some reason, helped a collaborator to port something to AIX. I found some weird stuff there. So the AIX script has gotten a little bit better. And mostly I've been playing around with Ansible and learning about Jenkins pipelines. That's as far as I remember. I'm sure I did some other stuff, but just off the top of my head.
Cool. Michael?
So a little bit of work keeping the benchmarking jobs up and running, mostly because I haven't got them fully, being able to restart themselves and all that. Did the work to add the graphics for our new donators. There's PR out for that. Once that lands, I'm going to go ahead and get the regular monthly tweeting going. I think there was an issue with the suggested text, and I haven't looked lately, but I'll check if there's any other comments, but otherwise we'll get that going. A little bit to get the okay for George to help out on the Mac install, and we're going to do a bootstrap later this week in terms of, me getting him set up with the credentials he needs and letting him know how far we got to date. And then continued work on setting up the ZOS machines. I mean, they're in the builds and running. I'm just fine-tuning. The last thing I'm fine-tuning is that we've got the changes to JIP that were required landed, and so now I'm fine-tuning where we pull JIP from. And it's just there's complications because the endpoint that that is exposed for JIP is HTTPS only as opposed to Git, and the node and the Git on ZOS doesn't support HTTPS, only Git. So I opened a PR as well.
I have an updated mirror. I'll send you a link on GitHub.
You have an updated what?
I keep a JIP mirror on GitHub.
Ah, okay. So, okay, in that case, I might be able to just pull that. Okay, yeah, send me that link, because that might be useful. The alternate thing I proposed, which we've talked a few times, is we talked about putting resources we needed to pull on the CI master. So I just documented what I thought the suggestions in the past were, and opened an issue to see if people were still comfortable doing that, and if necessary, I'll go ahead and do that.
I was going to say maybe that's something we should discuss here.
Yeah, we could open that issue and go
Okay.
through the simple thing that I put there. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, sorry, can you just refresh what that is?
Well, that's exactly what. Let me open that issue then, and I can walk through that. Or do you want to do that after we go
We'll
through
just go
the?
through it afterwards, but we can I'll put it in the agenda.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay.
So I guess George, I mean, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, hi. Hopefully, you guys will get to know me a little bit better over the next few months. Yeah, obviously, as Michael had said, I'd had a few chats with him about trying to get some access so that I can have a look at the Mac provisioning, see if we can get some Ansible scripts working. And obviously, as you guys have probably seen on the agenda, I've put together a little bit on Keybox. It's a tool that I've been using for another project that I obviously thought might be quite useful to perhaps bring over and introduce to the Node guys. So that was my idea anyway.
Sounds
Cool.
good.
Right, and myself, yeah, a bit of work on AX, things sort of go wrong, and yeah, also presentation. I've got to write up some slides, so I thought I would just put them on somewhere online and then link to them in an issue, and then people could feedback. Because I know, Rod, you were saying that there's loads of cool stuff that you think we should be talking about. So I'll put together a first draft and then, yeah, see if people want to.
Yeah, those slides, like I seem to remember, and if I can't remember, like there's a build private.
Right.
I can't remember if that's what I used for the slide deck for the previous year.
Right. I was thinking I might just, yeah, I'll find someone to put them.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it matters if we just have it in the public or repo or not, but I have some recollection that we didn't do that the last time.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that the point is that my takeaway from speaking about build stuff at conferences is simply that there's a lot of the audience that just loves that kind of technical detail about build machines, architectures, how we're, this it's a big cluster, and having insight into that is actually really exciting for a lot of people. And so simply sharing the sort of state of play is almost enough, and if you don't have to really do much more to make it exciting for a lot of the people that will be there.
Right.
Yeah, I sent Gibson the one that we used last year as a starting point, but
yep,
probably update that, and hopefully use the logos this year. I didn't use the logos last year, but I'm hoping we can get them in. I don't think you guys have the same reviews that we do in Canada, so it might be easier for you, Gibson, funnily enough.
I'll have a go, yeah. Okay, sounds good. Right, so that's me. So first thing on the agenda was, well, George, give us a look at Keybox.
Okay. I think, can I do a screen share here?
I'm not sure anyone ever has, but have a go.
Yeah, I've done it. It works.
Oh, okay.
Just press the little screen share button on the left.
Okay, so I'm hoping that you guys can all see my Firefox. Yep. Yeah?
Yep.
So yeah, very, very brief one really. But obviously, so yeah, we've been using this with Adopt OpenJDK. It's a really simple tool, and it basically just runs on a machine. It doesn't have sort of particularly vast requirement. I think it's about 4 gig of RAM and 2 cores is the sort of minimum runtime. But what you're basically presented with, you have a nice sort of web UI.
For context, for anybody listening on the stream, this is for managing SSH keys, right?
Yeah, so yeah, very briefly, Keybox, it's an open source, sort of GitHub-based SSH key management tool. The really nice thing about it to me is that you can essentially, you can go in and you can sort of add all of your machines. It doesn't currently support Windows particularly sort of out of the box, but you can get it to work with Windows. But yeah, you can basically just go along, add all your machines. You can add a whole set of keys and sort of assign profiles. And it's just a really nice way to audit what access everyone has to different machines.
For platform support, is it anything that supports SSH, or like as you mentioned, Windows?
It essentially just uses the SSH platform. But obviously with a bit of hackery in Windows, you could essentially run an SSH server through PowerShell.
Okay. So, but everything like, you know, AIX and ZOS where we have
Yeah,
SSH working.
We've got it working with AIX, ZOS, all of those. No issue. So I think we've pretty much got the same platform support as you guys. So yeah, going back, so you get a nice little web UI. I go to the Systems tab. It essentially just gives you a really nice summary of all of the machines that you've got. Shows you the username for the machine that you've added, obviously the host and port, and just a really sort of simple status of, you know, you can see we've got some machines that are failing, some that have got authentication failed, and some that are successful.
What does authentication failed mean?
So on this, authentication failed currently actually means that machine's disappeared. It's kind of an issue that we have, and I'm still trying to drum down exactly what the difference is between authentication failed and failed.
Does it does it periodically try and log in, or how does it know?
So the idea of Keybox is that it will essentially, in a similar way to Jenkins, it will, if it can't connect, it will go and repoll. I think it's a parameter that you can set. So I think at the moment every 30 minutes it will just try again and reconnect to a machine. So the basic summary is when you go and initiate like a Keybox connection, you log in, it prompts you for the password. So obviously you enter that. You can also just stick the public key straight onto there. So it's quite nice if you're sort of, you know, deploying from, I don't know, Amazon AWS or something. And basically what it will do is it will just go in and completely wipe the IDRSA and IDRSA pub files and then sort of start them as fresh. So it's really nice. You basically, what it means is you can't sort of have someone get access and then slip someone else's key on, because it will just go through every 30 minutes and revoke anything it doesn't understand. So to say, you have a really simple layout where you have all of your users. One of the issues that we've had at the moment is that we've found that we've had to basically go in and add every root user or admin user and every Jenkins user as two separate machines. It doesn't seem to sort of have much user support from that end, but as I say, you know, the point is this is open source, so you know, if we want to change it, we can go along and perhaps contribute a few tweaks. But yeah, so we have a nice sort of machine list, and if I go back to the home page, the next obvious thing is you have a profile, and what you get in your profiles is essentially it's basically saying I want to set this cluster of machines. And it's basically for assigning key access to a whole range of machines. So for example, we have here our Jenkins user profile. And if I go to assign systems and order by Jenkins, you'll note that all the Jenkins users are ticked and the rest of them aren't. So it's a really nice, simple way of basically saying, I'm going to give this key access to this profile and that's it. So yeah, going back to home again, the final sort of step that's really important for what we've been using is manage SSH keys. So from this end, you basically go in and you add a key. You can give it a sort of identifier name, and you can obviously, as you see, we have the profiles here. So we're saying, you know, let's give, for example, my key has access to all systems, but you'll see we also have users that have access to just the Jenkins users or a server or a test machine or anything like that. So what's really nice about this is you have a really quick audit to just go through and see exactly who's accessing what and for how long. One of the other really exciting things that I've been playing with, and I've got a fork sort of running sort of locally on my machine, is essentially having Keybox where you can add a key and basically set a timeout for it. So you can say, I'm going to add this key for 30 days. And at 30 days, when someone logs into the UI, it'll be like, this person's about to expire. Do you want to extend this or revoke it? And it's really as simple as that. And what's really nice about this system is, you know, click of a button, you can revoke anyone's access, and you can go back in and re-enable it, you know, really quickly. So it saves a lot of time. And the other nice thing is that you can basically, rather than adding the keys like I've done, you can actually assign people keys. So it will generate them for you, and you can distribute them out. But for us, we found it was easy just to basically have people send in their public key and then add it, using a really simple system here where you just add an SSH key, set it a name, a profile, and then paste it in. So yeah, that's kind of a very brief overview. Keybox has some other nice features. It allows you to very quickly run a script across a whole host of machines. It also has this nice area which is composite SSH terminals. So you could say I want to access, let's say, these 3 machines. And you can just go in and create an SSH session. And if you give it a minute, it will hopefully load up with 3 terminals. We'll see. There we go. So we have 3 nice terminals here. And you can go through and you can sort of, what's quite nice is you can select multiple terminals and type the same command in all of them at the same time. So it makes deploying machines sort of, obviously a step before Ansible. It makes it quite nice to use and just speeds things up a little bit. The main reason I was sort of demoing this is to say the main reason is that you can really quickly and simply audit any SSH key access. And I just think from what I've heard about how Node's currently doing it, it seems like a good, strong sort of competitor, and perhaps something that we could look at implementing at some point.
What's the bootstrap process? Like we've got a new machine to put some SSH key on the machine to start with,
so,
right?
So you're basically, when you go and set up Keybox in its sort of initial term, it generates itself a public key.
Okay.
And it's basically a case of you add that public key to whichever machine in its SSH profile. And then you can just go ahead and click add, specify a host name, a port, and it will literally just try and authenticate it for you. As I say, at that point, if it's accepted, it will go in and just wipe the IDRSA files and sort of start it as fresh. And so what's really nice is if you're sort of auto-deploying a system, as I say, it can stagger down. So for us, we have all our sort of deployment tools. We just deploy it with that single key. And then when Keybox connects, it puts all the admin's keys on straight away, and you can immediately sort of step in, and it makes the initial process a lot quicker. So that's kind of how it sort of sets up. As I say, it really is as simple as just adding the key, going in, adding the host name, and then it will try and essentially authenticate it like any other SSH session.
Is there
and it would wipe out pretty much all of our current workflow with those shared keys that we use.
Yeah, and rolling over would be easy, I think.
Yeah, adding and removing people would be so good, because right now, if we remove somebody from the core of our team, that's going to be crazy. I do have one question about the SSH config to get into the machines. Are you able to make it any more sophisticated than just hostname and port? Because we do use jump hosts for some of our infrastructure.
So as of now, it doesn't handle jump hosts. But again, I was talking to one of the developers, and that's kind of supposedly on their back burner. They sort of said that they had a working prototype that they were going to send over to me, but I never received it. I mean, I can't imagine why it wouldn't be possible to get that working in some sort of applet that ran on the basic server side. But for now, it is currently only if you've got a basic external facing IP.
Yeah, I mean, we could do something like, yeah, I can imagine there's hackery we could do to fix that, but yeah, that would be one little thing that would be nice to add.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, the beauty to this is, right, it's open source, so, we can perhaps get a little bit more involved and go and add these features, where we see necessary. Because, it's a really nice system to just be able to it does simplify everything from the perspective of what I've seen anyway with adopting JK. And it's made it a lot easier for one person on my own to be managing all the machines,
Is the can you back up the config?
It doesn't have an inbuilt config, but again, we just run a simple cron job that pushes out the config. It has a few sort of config files in a pretty structured directory. As I say, there's a few tweaks that you can make in the config files, such as the tweak that I made where it said that rather than generating a new key, I just upload someone's public key. So you kind of get it set up, and then you go in and just basically edit the config and then restart the service. But yeah, I mean, you can go and back up those files. There's nothing confidential hidden in them as such.
I assume that there's also not anything particularly complicated about the user level access to the AP to the UI. Is it just if you can get to the UI, you can do everything?
You can have users and admins. It gets a little bit complicated. I haven't really gone down that route, but the idea is that you could have if there's keys on machines, you could just give them access to the UI and they could use the web sort of terminal session and go through Keybox rather than, I think that, I don't know, that to me, that didn't really seem to, I mean, as I say, I think you can specify adding keys. You can also give lower access to just be able to add a new system and stuff like that. There are a few different tiers of user access.
Because the complication that we would have is that we have 3 different levels of access.
Right.
And most of the people on the team have the lowest, which is test. And so right now, if somebody on the collaborative team said, I want to have access to a machine to do some messing around, anybody in that test group could log into that machine and add their public key and give them access. If we had a system where only the top level people could do that, then we've got a smaller choke point of people. Hey, I want access to a machine. Oh, you've got to wait for one of the infra people to get around.
Well, yeah, so you can basically, I mean, the obvious thing would be to just only give the top level infra guys user IDs to the actual Keybox UI, I suppose. And then the lower level wouldn't have that. They'd just have the keys there in a profile.
Yeah, but then they wouldn't be able to give access to other people, which is what we've got now. So for instance, Raphael here is on test. He's very much more responsive than Michael and I on GitHub. If somebody comes along and says, "Look, I need access to a Mac OS machine," he could do that now, and that's very responsive, and can manage all that stuff. So it'd be nice. Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the alternatives here is to run multiple instances of Keybox.
Right.
So there's a test instance, and then there's a much higher instance. Because really all we want to do is separate, critical infrastructure and release machines from the test machines. That's all we want to do. So 2 different instances, like we do with our CI now, would probably solve the problem if it's not in the UI.
And that may make sense. Yeah, I could see that separation maybe making sense for other reasons even. So.
Yeah, that possibly might make more sense.
Although I have to say, I had this exact scenario this week, and still, I'd rather much, be the proxy for the third party than give him access until I got some looks good to me from other folks.
Yeah, we still have that process to follow in terms of if we're going to give somebody access to the machine, making sure they
has to be
criteria and all that.
Yeah. So in general, I get what you're saying, but I don't think it's super critical. So as long as I can get there and be their hands, we can get the smaller things done anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I guess you could have approvals from other, like you could say something and I could approve, or George could, someone else on the team could approve who wasn't one of the infra. There's only, is it 3 people now who have infra access, or 4? Yeah, anyway, so it could be someone else in build generally sort of saying, yeah, that sounds good, let's go. And I guess it depends who it is as well, right? So if it's someone like Targos who's had access to those machines before, done a load of stuff, like it's just a question of, okay, raise the request, someone else is fine, that's it.
On the other hand, another thing that came up was just after my onboarding, I was kind of weary of having the same uniform key on my computer. As much as I try to keep it sterile, I could be compromised, and I don't want to compromise the entire system because we all have uniform keys. And this solution is way more secure in my point of view.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and I bet you it would allow you to just rotate the keys too if you wanted to, every month or something. It's much more practical to do that kind of thing.
So does it have a UI where you can change the master key for Keybox, and it will go and update that on the systems? Do you know?
I think if I remember rightly, there was some special flag that you could give the service to essentially regenerate its master key and then go and push it out again. It definitely had some inbuilt function to do that. I haven't tested it, so I can't confirm it works, but there was definitely a flag that you could add when you start the service that would essentially go and regenerate that for you.
And so how long have you been using it? And in that time, have you had any trouble at all with being locked out accidentally?
Yeah, that's one thing I was wondering about too.
Yeah, no, so we've been using it for about 4 months now. We haven't had any accidents, but I mean, talking to some of the other infra guys, we very early on realized that we were going to have issues if, let's say, Keybox went rogue as such. And we actually went down the route of creating what we have as like a Zeus super user. And so we basically added to all our Ansible scripts this separate sort of Zeus user that could take control and enable we could still access machines and grab data back. You know, for whatever reason, because we were a little bit concerned about, you know, giving Keybox the power to just wipe all access, you know, at the click of a button. So no, we haven't had any issues, but I think had we not gone and sort of left that back door, we could possibly face issues.
So basically,
does that mean you've got a second master key for the Zeus user, or is there a password? How do you manage that?
I mean, generally we have in a similar way to Node, we have a secrets repo that contains an encrypted key for the Zeus user, and obviously on some of the machines we've got a password instead. But yeah, the idea of Zeus is it just allowed us to sort of, you know, still have that root control over whatever Keybox wanted to do. I mean, it's not the ideal solution because obviously you've then got another key.
But it's another layer of assurance. I mean, I think until you really trust the system deeply, then it does make sense. I think in most cases, if we were to lose access to, you know, a single box, then there's not many where we couldn't just wipe it away and re-provision. Like it's become a fairly easy process. But if, say, Keybox was to revoke access to all of our machines, that would be a long week. That would.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So, you know, it's good to add that layer of protection, which is why we did it, just to prevent that from happening, really.
And basically, the Zeus user is a user who's got root. There's a key installed, but Keybox doesn't know anything about that user, so it will never overwrite.
Precisely. When you add any user, you add the username, the host name, and the port. So, as I said, you have to add a Jenkins user and a root user, which in a certain way is nice because it allows you to differentiate quite simply. You know, as to say, this is a Jenkins user, only give it to people with a Jenkins profile. This is root, don't give it to anyone that doesn't have admin access or whatever. So yeah, you basically just won't touch a username that isn't sort of hard coded. As I say, it's an SSH connection, so it doesn't understand any other code.
Is there a way to script like adding a new machine, or do you have to go in and actually type all that?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could import basically all of our stuff from our config that we already have.
Yeah, I mean, it has a pretty basic config file that it lays out, which just has host name, nickname, IP, username, and port, I think. And I think it's just like a JSON array that it uses, so you could probably script migrating it quite quickly, I would imagine, if you've got it in some form of sort of readable context.
Cool. Anything else? If not, I guess the next thing is to, I mean, how do we start trying it out?
What's the next step? Do we think this is, you could start by managing a smaller set of machines with it, if that's...
Yeah, well, maybe just one or two, right? Just put it on somewhere in the test, in a box, and then just put a couple of test machines on it and see how that goes.
Yeah. As I say, I just need a lightweight Linux box, and I can install it on that. I mean, it will run on pretty much any Unix system, but, a lightweight Linux box is fine. And then obviously, we can play around and slowly introduce machines to the pool, I suppose.
How do you authenticate with the servers? Have something built in, or do you have a front end?
You can, as I say, generally what I've been doing is, because of the way that we use Ansible, I've been automating having the ID RSA keys just dumped straight onto the machine. But if for whatever reason it can't find its key on the machine, it will also give you a password prompt sort of inbuilt that you can then go and do it, and it will copy its key over for you. So you can kind of do it either way.
So no, I mean to actually use the Keybox UI, like.
Oh right. Well, yeah, you basically just has a front end login window that you just go to. I think you're logged out, but you can use OAuth as well. But yeah, it just has a really simple front end login thing, and you can use two-factor authentication with it as well, which is quite useful.
So it has, like, it's, you type in your username and give it a password that you've assigned, and
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we get this set up? Do we just create a new machine? I mean, is there anything fancy we have to do to get it added into the pool?
And does it need to be a separate machine? Like, I don't know, Rod, are there any existing machines that would be a suitable place to run it?
I have to think about that one. Maybe it would make sense to run it on the CI and CI release machine.
Yeah, I don't, I mean, that's one that came to mind. If it doesn't have a lot of resource requirements, do we really need a whole new machine, or just sharing that one? That might make a lot of sense.
Yeah, because we're already pretty tight with who gets access to those machines as it is. So, the only concern there would be, Jenkins has had a lot of security problems in the past. So, are we exposing
Right.
our keybox master to security vulnerabilities just by hosting it with Jenkins? Maybe. I mean, we could set up just a small machine somewhere, like a small instance, and run both of them on there. Let's have a think about that. Maybe let's open there's already an issue for this, isn't there? Or should we open a new issue?
I've got a quick issue that I put together a while ago.
Okay. Yep,
Yeah.
let's use that then. And I don't know, I'll have a think about that, but if you guys have thoughts as well.
Yeah, so maybe suggest, once you've thought about it, think about it, or suggest where we might install it.
Right, cool. So next issue is number 809. Next two issues are using GC 4.9 on CentOS 6 and Ubuntu 14. I feel like they're really the same issue, just two different PRs. But I guess the reason they're on is because you had a comment somewhere, didn't you, that said that they break 32-bit support, which sounds a bit catastrophic.
Right. And they break 32-bit support because the compilers don't support 32-bit, or that it's broken on 32-bit, or what's the...
Doesn't RHEL 6 not support 32-bit?
What, 32-bit builds of Node? I feel like it must.
No, 32-bit OSs, like 32-bit.
Oh, I see. I think
I thought with RHEL 6 they stopped shipping 32-bit, but we can still compile down to 32-bit. But
right.
So I guess the question is, do people want to be running 32-bit on 64-bit machines for compatibility or whatever?
Yeah, well, I guess that the problem here is that was raised about the release machines. So the status of release is we're building on CentOS 5 for everything up to Node 8, and then everything from Node 8 beyond is so far is CentOS 6. Now, I was thinking about this today. If we, because we could keep on using an old compiler for the release builds for those machines, and have a new compiler on CentOS 7 for newer builds of Node release builds. I don't know, but we're not saying here that we have to absolutely have this new compiler on every CentOS 6 machine if we have a reason to use an old compiler for release builds for consistency. Because I believe the concern here is that those compiler bugs we're starting to introduce problems with the newer versions of V8, and so we need to protect ourselves against that by having a slightly newer version of GCC. Currently, we don't have an actual issue because that's been patched. The one that we had was patched, but this is sort of a protection measure. So we could imagine in Node 9 or 10, something gets introduced that we either can't patch or is not going to be patched upstream. So yeah, I don't know. This is really hard because there's also no guarantee that GCC 4.9 is going to be any better.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. Yeah, for Node 8, I mean, V8 shouldn't be updated anymore, right? Well, maybe it'll go 6.1, but 6.1 seems like it's working, so we should be okay for there. It's kind of more a question of what we do going forward, it seems. I mean, do we need to keep doing 32-bit builds? Like, is there a lot of demand for them? Can we get like download stats on how many people?
Yeah, if you go to node.js.org/metrics,
right,
you can go to the summaries page and you can actually see architectures and see the decline of 32-bit. I still think it's non-trivial though.
Well, I guess the question is how much of that is, like Travis builds and NVM and just pulling down all the architectures.
Yeah, we have no way of knowing.
Sure.
But is it? I still, sorry, I didn't quite follow why 32-bit is broken with that version of GCC. Like they don't support it anymore, or are there bugs, or?
The dev toolset is 64-bit only. That's what Chris Lee said in the 797?
But can it compile down to 32-bit? Because if it can still do that, then that should be fine.
As like as a sort of cross compiling.
We just wouldn't test Node on 32-bit CentOS 6. So yeah, maybe I think he's just talking about saying we couldn't test it on a 32-bit machine. This is Nikolai.
Right, and I'm not even sure that we can do CentOS 6 32-bit. I don't know what our current machines are, but from memory, it's just not even possible to do CentOS 6 32-bit.
Yeah, I'd agree that it's, as long as we can build the 32-bit binary and it runs on a 64-bit machine and tests that way, that's much less of a concern than not being able to do it at all.
I'm going to put a link to the architectures graph in Node Build. I don't have access to the chat here because I'm on my phone. But in Node Build on IC, I put a link there, and you'll see that 32-bit is basically stagnant.
Right. So I guess the question is, if we were going to look to drop it, would that be 9, 10, 12? Like how far away? Or would you just keep doing it forever?
Yeah, I mean, it's still like with VMs, often you build VMs that could make sense as 32-bit versions of the OS. So unless the OS is not available.
There is a trend, though, towards dropping 32-bit. And we're seeing it. I mean, Red Hat is pushing this. I don't think Fedora can do 32-bit anymore. RHEL and CentOS can't with the newer ones, I'm pretty sure. So there is a trend now to operating systems being unavailable for 32-bit.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's certainly true of the IBM platforms too.
Yeah, well, so you wouldn't be breaking anyone because no one can have a 32-bit OS that can't handle your 64-bit binary. It just might be that people think that people want some kind of space saving, or basically less memory.
I think maybe, I mean, this goes back to that discussion we were having about the supported platforms, Gibson, that maybe in Node 9 or 10, the build working group just says, look, it's time to drop 32-bit builds. They're just not worth it.
Well, it'd be nice to have a way to like flush out the people because it always seems to be last minute, like 10 people suddenly turn up who say, yeah, I'm still running CentOS 4, I've got, I'm using this old system and you're going to break me and this is why I can't upgrade and blah, blah, blah.
Well, maybe I don't know how better to do that other than to say, let's do it in a current that is an odd number. So Node 9 or Node 11, where we just drop it at the start and see how many screens there are.
Yeah,
perhaps there's no complaint, and because we could add it back later on. We could say, okay, we've heard, in the next minor release, we're going to add 32-bit back.
Yeah, okay.
Don't do it in LTS. That's all.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I guess because then you get the minor and you get the whole of the current period of the next LTS to actually get feedback and then break people and see how many people have issues. Yeah. What about other platforms like ARM? I mean, presumably there are more people on embedded running 32-bit. Is that the case?
Well, no, because
ARM are uniform.
There's really no 32-bit embedded platforms other than old ARM and even the new ARM's going 64-bit. So nothing modern is 32-bit anymore.
Right. So basically, if it's powerful enough to run Node, it's going to be 64-bit.
Yeah, and we're really talking about 32-bit Intel here. That's really what we're limiting this discussion to. So the question for me would be Windows, but I believe Windows is dropping support for that. I can't remember what the status of that is. But I would assume that that's safe as well, because even their embedded Windows, that's just ARM. It's not Intel 32. It's ARM. And even the stuff that Intel's been shipping for embedded, like their Edison and all the rest of that stuff, Atom, it's all still 64-bit. So.
And the toolset is cross-compiled, tested, and double and triple tested. So there shouldn't be a problem to compile 32-bit on a 64-bit host.
Okay, well that gives us then. So the only thing we can't do is do a native test, but we can still run the 32-bit on a 64-bit platform, so we can test the 32-bit binaries. So
and it's almost native because they're side-by-side bit. It's
right.
There's a whole set of deals. It's almost the kernel is almost double. So it's
okay. So maybe this is not an issue, but the thing that's
Windows.
coming up here is that we should flag is the option for Node to drop 32-bit binaries at some point in the future.
Yep.
Somehow we need to flag that as a possibility to the rest of the
If we're going to do that as an odd, is 9 too soon? So I mean, 11 would 11 be the target, or is 9?
I would think 9's too soon.
I don't think 9's too soon. From the graph Rod is showing us, it seems like the 64, the 80, the 32-bit. From imagination, it seems like it's the old systems, just people not upgrading. It's as if there's
it doesn't
no
leave
new.
a lot of time for discussion, though.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, that's the problem. The other thing to combine with that is that sure, people are using it in their old systems, but we have already bumped the minimum system requirements with Node 8 by compiling on CentOS 6. So if you're still using an old system, then you're probably not going to even be able to access the latest version of Node anyway. So we're already knocking people out. So those people may just disappear anyway. Even if they're real, I mean, those downloads could just be people mirroring.
Yep. So maybe
they'll stay on an old LTS anyway. They won't be on a migration path.
Right.
So maybe, well, as you said, Rod, we could try it for like, if we treat this as a trial opportunity and sort of say, right, this is the plan. Any objections? And then if 9, as you said, if 9.0 goes out and it doesn't support it and there's lots of blowback, then I guess we'll know, okay, maybe wait another couple of releases.
What kind of work do we have to do to stop?
Sorry, I'm just wondering, does anyone know the status of any other major projects and the binaries they're shipping?
No, that might be a good thing to try and get a list of.
So my preference would be to err on the conservative side here and go with Node 11, but I don't see a strong case for not doing it other than just being conservative.
Yeah, I guess for me it would be, it doesn't leave a lot of time for discussion. It also, what do we actually have to do to stop building 32-bit? There's probably some work we have to do as well for that, right?
If it's just X.
No, I don't think so. I think because we can do it all in Jenkins like we do now with the switch on, we've got those switches in there, say if this is Node 8 or above, then do it on these machines. So it's just a little bit of Jenkins fiddling.
It's really just going to be if you're on 9 or above, or whatever it is, then skip if you're on X32, right?
So I guess that's still, work for somebody.
Yeah, it's work, but it shouldn't be, like, it should be just a few lines, because when Rod did the previous one for CentOS 6, yeah, it's because it's just the one job, isn't it? You actually have to
maybe some web page updates too.
Yeah.
We'd probably have to do the tests would be the one we'd have to go and look at as well, because we're talking about releases here, but we'd probably want to stop testing as well so that we don't have the strong infrastructure requirements and we can actually start to retire.
And the website might be a little more complicated to support, like older versions would have to show 32-bit, newer versions wouldn't.
True.
I just know that like when we were introducing some new platforms, I almost just waited until it was available on the current and the LTS because that was easier than.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a job we can just throw over to them and say, this is happening, figure it out.
Well, I guess we could just say, guys, this is sort of an idea / proposal. Does anyone have any issue with it, or didn't think that we shouldn't do it, or got some insurmountable problem, and then just see if people object. I guess the other thing is it would free up, like for Windows, we're currently doing, double our infrastructure, right? In terms of test machines.
I don't believe we've got anyone on this call that can really talk to the prevalence of 32-bit Windows. Getting Joao to weigh in on this would be good. So maybe this starts off as an issue in our build repo just to discuss amongst ourselves, and then we escalate it to the collaborators after we've gone through an internal discussion.
Sounds good. I can create one. But anyway, okay, so for the original issue, then the answer is, yeah, go ahead with CentOS 6 and Ubuntu.
I think so. I do think it needs a little bit more testing to confirm that the binaries that come out of this are compatible with native CentOS 6. That's my only concern, is that it might update a libc or libc++ that then produces binaries which won't run on native CentOS 6 without DevToolset 3 or whatever it is.
Okay, that should be reasonably straightforward to test, right? It's just
yes, it's just a matter of setting up a box with it to make a binary,
right.
and run it in a Docker container would be fine. That's what I usually do.
Okay, in that case, the Ubuntu 14 will be fine, right? Because that's not using a DevToolset equivalent, is it? It's just running directly.
Well, no, it depends on the version of libc that's on Ubuntu 14 compared to the one that's in DevToolset 5, whatever it is.
So I mean, the other PR to update the Ubuntu box, like that, we don't even build with that, right? That's just a test machine, I guess. 797.
Yes, that's correct. Actually, yes. So this is only about release. Yep.
Okay. So
I guess maybe I'll put that on my list of things to do. I know this has been blocking on me a little bit because it's just too hard to get my head around. But I'll do some testing on the release stuff with CentOS 6 and give sign off on that. But I think the Ubuntu 14 can just go ahead.
Okay, excellent. Right, I'll put something then after. Okay, so the last thing we have on the agenda is 871, store resources and app for Ansible on Jenkins CI master, I guess, Michael?
Right, so this is just, we've run into a number of cases where, there's some resources we want to install, but they're not available, you can't pull them from anywhere else. So I think it was Johan who suggested something along these lines earlier, which was, maybe let's just store them on the CI master. And so, what I've put in the issue in terms of the way to do that would be create a new user on the CI machine called resources, generate a key pair for that user, and then have the Ansible scripts render the key for that user onto the test machines. And then we could use Ansible to SCP from there to install the resources onto the machine. And the one alternative I had was I'm not sure if we can do this in Ansible, but we might be able to basically just have the key pair installed on the machine you're running Ansible on and do a hop where it moves the resources from the CI master to the machine where you're running Ansible, and then from where you're running, then move them from that machine onto the target test machine.
Yeah, you could do that with SSH agent.
Right.
I think in Ansible. What sort of resources are here? Because I've had similar things like with the there's a current problem with the ARM v7 machines using an ARM v6 compiler. I have an ARM v7 version of GCC that I made manually, but it needs to go somewhere. My assumption was that it would just go on an HTTP server and you could just download it that way. Are there any resources here that are so protected that they couldn't just be served via HTTP from?
No, no, there isn't any reason why we couldn't just put them on. I don't think they're AIX bundles, but they're like bundles that are freely downloadable. The other one was like the JIP package. So yeah, there's nothing that I think that needs to be protected. It was just, this is a way that doesn't require installing another server or something like that.
Because just having Nginx serve a static directory and we just load that up with whatever we want, I'd be happy with that, because that would serve all the cases that I've come across.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that would work fine as well.
Presumably, would you limit it to only the machines that we know about? Or because, I mean, I guess you could end up with random people starting to use it as a download server.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, that was, I guess.
But we reserve the right to change file names and do whatever we like with it. So
Yeah, true. But I guess
to be honest, like with the ARM v7 stuff, that compiler I had to build, I actually wouldn't be terribly upset if people started using that, because it's like I couldn't get it any other way than build GCC from scratch on an ARM v7 machine.
I think two things. One is, I think in the case of what I'm doing for ZOS, if it's HTTPS, that wouldn't solve my problem, because it's the HTTPS I'm having trouble with in the first place. The other one was,
we could make it optional so that it's both serves both.
Yeah, if it's just
HTTP.
HTTP, then it would be fine.
Yeah.
The other one was the yeah. I just was wondering if running another server on the machine was, there's some security risk with that.
Much more concerned about the security risk that Jenkins poses than Nginx.
Sure. So yeah, and you're right. We could easily have a directory that's served in multiple ways, like SCP in the 1K. If it's like, would you be worried about serving these things just through plain HTTP?
No, so what I would say is that we set up Nginx to serve on both,
right?
And we use the one that we use HTTPS where we can.
Okay.
In all our Jenkins, in all our Ansible scripts, but then where we can't, we just use HTTP. There's no reason to do strict HTTP. I don't see. Yeah, this is just purely for our reassurance that in the cases where we can, we are having maximum protection of transferring those resources.
Yeah, it sounds reasonable.
I reckon that's the easiest path. In fact, what issue number is that?
It is 871.
I mean, I could do that today if you want to set up that Nginx stuff and make that user and.
No, that sounds great.
Give that user a directory that we can dump stuff in. Yep.
No, that'd be fantastic. So yeah, if we just have a place we can add in place things, I think that would work really well.
Would that be an infra, just the node build infra account?
Yeah, because infra gets access to CR release, but if we need broader access, because it'll be a separate user, we could actually give out access to other people that needed it to dump things in there, because it'll just be a unprivileged user on that machine.
I guess the other question is running another server likely to load the machine, given that you've already got Jenkins, which can be a bit of a hog?
Not Nginx. It's so trivial. That's so efficient.
Right.
I also don't think it's only when we're provisioning things through Ansible that I don't think it's going to be all that often. So the transfer itself probably doesn't make too much of a difference.
And if we notice actually a lot of people using it, say perhaps it gets on Stack Overflow and people start using it, then we just switch it up.
Yep, fair enough. Cool. Okay, I guess Rod's going to do that. That's easy.
Yeah, just comment what you've done in that issue as an alternative, and sounds great.
Right. Anything else from anyone here? Seems pretty good. And any questions from anyone watching or on IRC or in the issue? If you've got any questions, just comment. Roddy, did I hear you say you're on IRC?
I'm on IRC. I can pop over there.
Guess we'll give it a minute to see if anyone has anything.
As well, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right now it only shows one viewer, so maybe just give a couple minutes. But
okay.
And while you wait, if I know Rod put his LGTM on the graphics, but if anybody else could take a look, I probably would like to land that sooner than later. So unless there's an objection, I won't wait. Maybe do it tomorrow morning.
I didn't get back to you on the software for that, Michael. What did you use in the end?
I just used Paint.
Okay.
It let me export PNGs, so I just opened up the stuff with Paint, and I figured it worked, so I did it.
Cool. Yeah, as I said, it looks good to me.
So everybody okay if I land that tomorrow morning?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Cool. I think if that's if no one's commented by now, then it'll be good. So thanks very much, and we'll pick it up in 3 weeks.
Okay, thanks. Nice talking to everybody.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye.
And welcome, George.